Hi, this is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. It's Monday, May 27th, 2019. And I was just watching Jimmy Dore, and I started thinking about capitalism and about my experience with, I went to one of the top 10 business schools in the United States. At the time it was, anyway. And, of course, that was just, in my opinion, that was just because the people who my dad worked for, I think they arranged that. Because, I was in class the first day and my teacher handed out two magazines. One was Newsweek and the other one was like U.S. News or something like that. And, over the years I've done a lot of studying, and of course all that Time Life and everything, they're all CIA rags. So I think that they were told to put, because, come on, University of St. Thomas, Cameron Business School at University, and why? Why is it one of the top 10? In fact, why is any business program in the United States top 10? They all teach you the exact same thing. So it's all a game so that people like my dad can be rewarded. I'm sure that that's one of the things that they told my dad was, well, your son will get the best education. We'll make sure you have a nice place to live wherever you go. All that kind of crap, right? These are the kind of, why else would anybody do the dangerous shit that they're asking them to do? And it was dangerous for me. At least my dad understood what he was doing. I didn't know. So, I'd get beat up by, poor people in Lebanon, Indonesia, fall under threat. In Indonesia at one point, because some American one of the kids from school hit a, Indonesian with his car or something. And we weren't able to go outside for like a week. School was called off because the people were irate because they couldn't do anything to the American who hit them. It'd just be like if some Saudi Arabian, rich Saudi Arabian hit a kid in the U.S. and Americans wanted. So anyway, this isn't really about that. What I'm really talking about here is, and I'll do this segment as part of my group, Why Capitalism Sucks, is because when you go to school, you learn the same thing that everybody else knows, right? Other than that, you learn a bunch of bullshit that doesn't even matter. There isn't anything in macroeconomics that mattered. Microeconomics either, because all they teach you is what you're going to learn anyway when you get out there. Again, it's funny that it comes down. This video. I just happened to see a bunch of smoke, so because I was working at a dealership, and I go over to this house is on fire, and it's catching the house next to it on fire. And So, I mean, I find out that this, what is it with capitalism? I mean, so this old lady owns the houses, and of course the kids have nowhere to go because there's no jobs or anything. I mean, we're talking the southern tip of Ohio, place called South Point, aptly named. It's right across from Huntington, West Virginia. You got Huntington, and you've got Ashland, Kentucky, all there right there on the Ohio River where it makes a big turn. And they've got no place to go. And so they're probably a bunch of losers because they're, in capitalist terms, because they're probably all doing drugs. Probably at 10, 15 years old, they're probably all doing drugs because they don't have anything else to do. I mean, they want to enjoy life, right? But they can't. Or they want to be something or do something. It just depends on how propagandized you are, right? So she has the older son who somehow probably is surviving, go up there and kick them all out of the house. And I guess some of them were trying to stay in the abandoned house next door and caught it on fire, probably trying to stay warm. Anyway, I've told this story a million times because that video ends up being on so many of my shows. So back to what I'm talking about. So they teach you the same thing that you already know. Everybody's heard of supply equals demand, right? And then when you take the classes, microeconomics, they teach you why supply equals demand. And there's a couple of curves, and where they intersect, you're supposed to pick that price, and at that price, you'll make the most money. Okay? Of course, nobody does that. What they do is, as I explained, like I used to set my price more by how much money I needed. So like if my rent was due or something like that, I'd start gouging people, trying to get more money out of them. So I mean, in reality, it doesn't work out anything. It doesn't. School is kind of bullshit, Now, what I'm taking issue with here, and this is, we're finally getting to what the segment is actually about, and that is that supply is supposed to equal demand, and certainly in terms of what people need. Like they need water, they need food, they need drinking water, they need water to wash with, right? They need water to flush their toilets, things like that. All of which is probably going to have to change in the next 20 to 50 years, because we're not going to have water flushing toilets anymore. We're not going to have water. I mean, maybe if we change the water system to where we drink either bottled water or create a new system of pipes with filtered water, because people are dying from the water. Okay, my father's already dead because of bladder cancer, and this is caused by shitty drinking water with all kinds of contaminants in it, like DuPont C8 and all these different companies spilling really, really dangerous chemicals. And, they can find CA, or whatever it is, the stuff from Teflon, in the ice at the North Pole now. That's how much it spreads around. And once it gets into the environment, it doesn't get out. Now, all the bitching about global warming and stuff, that's up for debate. Will climate change really be bad or good? All up for debate, but I can tell you one thing isn't up for debate, and that's pollution. And, it's killing all the bees, and, I spelled until wrong. Just the weirdest things but this is a really cool Because what I'm illustrating in this thing here is the typical American's chasing a dollar, then they get thrown in jail, and then they become, negative. Anyway, so you've got all these polluters and stuff, and that's for sure the real issue. But supply equals demand. Okay, back to what I'm talking about. It doesn't equal demand. Supply equals demand. We think of it as, and dumbass people who don't know anything about economics will try and pass it off as meaning that capitalism is good at supplying people with the things that they need. And they even go so far as to say, well, it'll even supply people with what they want. Well, we all know that's bullshit, right? Everybody I met when I was in jail for something I didn't do, by the way. I did not threaten anybody at the Department of Community-Based Services. I was simply driving down the street. They put me on hold. I was talking. I was doing one of my segments, like I'm doing right now, and I was talking about how angry they make people. I decided to use myself as an example. So I said, well, the things that they've done to me in the past have made me so angry, they make me want to kill them. They make me want to shoot somebody, blow somebody up. Okay, and I was using me as an example because I was really, the segment that I was talking about was about how they're pissing everybody off and how it's dangerous because sooner or later somebody's going to want to kill somebody or blow somebody up. And that's all I was doing. I was in no way trying to threaten them. I didn't know they were listening, but I was in no way trying to threaten anybody. I was simply trying to discuss how angry, because I felt like they're creating a dangerous situation. It's that simple. Anyway, so I ended up in jail. So everybody I met when I was in jail was in jail for the same thing. They were either angry and didn't want to participate in the system anymore, so they didn't want to work, so they were stealing, or they were doing drugs to escape reality. So no matter how you look at it, our jails are full of people who really are heroes. They're the ones who they had the balls to stand up and fight back. Okay, yeah, maybe it is stupid to do that, but that's the truth. That's the truth. They really are. We think of everybody in jail as being all these horrible people. Well, they're not. They're not. 90% of them, 9 out of 10 of them that I met, are really just people who they're a little too American. You know what I mean? They don't believe in they believe in freedom, and they don't believe in being pushed around by people and all those kind of things. All the rest of us, we believe the same things, but we're not willing to go so far as to walk into a Walmart and try and walk out with speakers in our pants. What else did and there were all kinds of people who were innocent in there, and they're fucked up now. Like one guy was telling me about how he got caught because he had a car that he'd bought on Craigslist, and it was stolen. So he gets caught driving it, and he ends up in jail. Well, the thing is he was pretty straightforward guy before that, but once he's in jail, he starts getting hooked on pills, and they put him in a drug program. And because he's in there for so long for stealing a car, getting caught for the drugs actually turns out to be a good thing for him, because then he can go to drug court. But once he's in the drug program, it's so funny. They put him in this rehabilitation clinic, and it's downtown in the worst neighborhood where everybody buys drugs, right? And everybody does drugs, hookers, drugs, the whole bit, So he's just in hog heaven. He's down there where he can do drugs all the time. And the drug program, oh God, let me tell you, they're so out of touch. The people who run things at the local level, all the way up to the president, they're so out of touch. I mean, they all ought to go to jail and spend some time in jail like I did. And it's been so good for my journalism because I learned a lot when I was in jail. So anyway, back to my main point is the capitalist system does not produce, it has everybody convinced that capitalism is going to somehow create a world, a country, because we're within countries, and I'm going to talk about nationalism a bit before we go to, hopefully, but because, why not the whole world? Why do we limit it to nations? Well, why do we limit it to gangs? People join gangs. Why do we limit it to churches? People join churches. Everybody's trying to be in a group that will protect them. Supply does not equal demand. The idea that people get that capitalism is going to create yes, nobody's starving to death in the United States, but we've got a whole world around us that's, demanding. Okay, but let's not get into all that. So the main point here is that it's not. Supply is not equaling demand. There's all kinds of people, and that's why they end up in jail, because they're trying to get enough just to survive, right? A lot of people feel like they're in survival situations. And so that's the reason for a lot of the crime. And everybody wants to end crime because people hurt each other when they start committing crimes. And in that respect, yes, I'm totally against crime. When I was talking about people in jail, I'm objecting to the fact that we think of them as being these horrible people. So basically that's it. I mean, the supply does not equal demand in a capitalist system. What supply equals is how much money the people have to spend, right? So disposable income is equal to supply, because companies are going to supply as much as people buy, right? So that's the reality. I mean, that's the reality. It's not, capitalism is not going to produce, and so let's ask the question, so what is, how do we decide how much money there is? Well, that's decided by how many people have companies and run them and pay people, right? And if the government has projects and departments and stuff, the government pays people. They're I think the largest employer, maybe Walmart is, I'm not sure. And that could all be changing. Walmart's shutting down stores all over the United States. But so that's the real, and so the people who are really in control of supply are the people who control the money, right, and employment. Now, that pretty much explains what I've been telling everybody all along, and that's that if you look at the real numbers for employment, they really are that only 1 in 3 people in the United States actually has an income. Everybody else is living off of somebody else. But actually, if you look at the numbers, and it's always, so it's static. never changes. If you look at the numbers over the last 100 years at least, you'll immediately notice that people between 18 and or over 18 were eligible to work, right? Out of those people, only 1 in 3 actually has a job. So everybody else is dependent upon those people, which is bad. I mean, everybody should have their own secure income, right? I mean, that's just, we all, to one extent or another, and as long as you try, as long as you're willing to participate, as long as you're willing to work, you know, up to a point where, I mean, I think people should be allowed to retire. Like me, I'm 58 years old, and I started having lots of physical issues and needed to spend my time not sitting on a mechanic's roller going around cars, which really fucked up my knees and my back. Didn't help it. And by the way, people, don't let your kids play physical sports. You know, the ones like I played, like rugby and soccer and stuff. Your knees, your ankles, your back, all totally fucked when you hit about 50 years old. Okay? Don't do it. Don't let your kids do it. So anyway, so where was I? So you got really supply is equal to how much money they're willing to give people. And that's why we have food stamps. They bitch about food stamps, but the fact is people wouldn't be able to, the system doesn't support it. It doesn't support people buying that much food. We can produce that much food. We can produce way more food. As a matter of fact, we're trying to sell our food to people all around the world because we produce so much of it. But, and I don't know how much of a good thing that is either, because you know, what's sustainable? We have to do a lot of things differently. I mean, I hate to bring this up, but where's all the shit going? People take dumps every day. Should be going into the fields, right? And producing new ground soil, but where is it going? It goes into like a, I don't know, these are some of the many questions that I have, and I don't seem to ever get an answer to. I just don't think that we're doing things very well. I think our whole culture, our whole McDonald's, producing all this trash. You know what I do? I save everything. Every bag that I use, I clean it, fold it up, and save it. Every plastic bottle I save. I've been doing this for years. I'm waiting for a place that really recycles. Why don't we have in every community within, and maybe they could just go pick it up, because I don't believe that they're really recycling the recycled stuff. And if they are, why don't they pay us? Isn't our, if we put, you know, if you did like me and you saved all your paper and kept it, and you saved all your plastic bottles and cleaned them out so that they're ready for recycling, because I know they don't take the dirty, they just throw them in the trash and try to ship it to different countries, Indonesia or these weird countries you've never even heard of. They actually pay them to take our trash. None of it's sustainable, man. You know, none of it. It's not working. It's not working, and we're all afraid of when it's going to hit that tipping point where it all tips back on top of us. You know, where you end up underneath that big rock. And that's really what everybody's scared of, right? I mean, I know it's what I'm scared of. You know, when's it just going to be too much? Too much. and then it's going to fall back on top of you, right? And you're afraid that the government really isn't taking it seriously enough. So, yeah, I mean, why am I worried about supply equaling demand? Because I'm worried about the people out there who I met when I was in jail. They're dangerous. They're absolutely dangerous. I'm not going to argue with that. Even though I say that, I think they're kind of heroes. No, I think they are heroes in a way. In a way, right? In another way, they're not. They're troublemakers. And almost all of them are troublemakers. They're rowdy and crazy and done too many drugs, gotten a little soft in the head. But I'm worried. I'm worried about them driving down my street and picking my house for a home invasion and walking in with a gun and killing me or somebody else, that I love. So I get that. I understand that. But we're not getting any solutions to those fears and those problems because we know they exist. All you have to do is turn on the TV at 5 o'clock and watch the news. If you're in a decent sized town, you'll hear about 5 different things. And they're all products of this capitalist system. So we know the capitalist system is not working, right? And this segment is where I'm trying to explain to you why. And I think I've done a pretty good job so far. So we know it's not producing, and we know it's causing the problems. The question is what to do about it, right? Well, if you're gonna worry about giving away things and therefore no incentive for people to work, then try it. All that you demand is that people be willing to work. So it would really be no different than it is now, but we would actually provide people with an income who we don't have work for and actually do all the work that needs to be done. So capitalism does not do all the work that needs to be done. It also does not hand out enough money to people. And, once we take care of those two problems, all we're left with is the problem of how many people they are and how do we provide for everybody. And do we need to, through birth control the number of people, keep it down to a certain level. So we let scientists make all those decisions and work with politicians to make all those decisions anyway, represented by, the people. So the people get to work with the scientists through their representatives to make those kind of decisions, and we end up with an economy that makes sense, right? The capitalist system would still be there. It would be there to produce whatever it produces, but on the whole, people would be able to, they would get an income, and they wouldn't be mooching off of each other as they are now, because like I said, 1 in 3 people actually has an income through the capitalist system, taxable income. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about those numbers. And there's no doubt about those numbers. If you want to question my numbers, there's no doubt. I mean, all you got to do is get on there and look at the number of people who, are employed, gainfully employed, and pay taxes versus the number of people in the United States who are over 18. It's not like brain surgery or something. It's not rocket science. So, yeah, I'm saying that, that other 2/3, the other 2 out of 3 Americans over 18, that they're the issue, right? And what triggered all this was I was watching Jimmy Dore here, and they were saying that Elizabeth Warren, who's, in my opinion, just another snowflake, you know, I mean, just typical white hillbilly woman, gets herself picked to represent people, and just nonsense. Anyway, she's always talking about, oh, the middle class, the middle class. Who gives a fuck about the middle class, man? We're talking about the poor people. You know, out of those 2 out of 3 people who are sucking off of each other, there's a percentage of them who don't have anybody to suck off of. You know, people like me, I've got my parents, so I can arrange for a retirement. I'll get my dad's inheritance, which I made most of that money anyway, working for him. He got 2/3 of everything I made. So, and I know I feel like I gotta justify things just like anybody else in this system. But outside of that, what I'm talking about is out of the 2 out of 3 people who don't have an income and they're sucking off of, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to those people. I'm one of them, okay? And I'm as hard a worker, harder worker than most people. I work for, you know, and I say you work from the time you go to kindergarten or even preschool. I mean, I say that's all part of work. You know, you're training. You know, you're training to be a part of society. You're training to get a job. You're training. So, you know, and I worked from the age of 16. I worked in a cancer lab in Palo Alto, Stanford Research Institute, all the way up till 52 years old. Okay. And then I couldn't work because I was in Europe, and I tried to get a job, and I suppose if I tried hard enough I could have gotten a job, but I didn't want one. I wanted to retire. You know, you work, it's enough. It's enough. You got all these people who aren't working, because unemployment is represented by this 3% number. There aren't 3% of Americans not working. There's 2 out of 3. There's 66% of Americans don't work. Okay? I mean, this is ridiculous that we can't understand the reality. And I've never understood these numbers. It's like when they talk about wars. Oh, we can raise an army of 500,000 people. Oh, there's 300 million people in the country. There's 270 million of them are over 18. You just put a gun in their hands and you've got a 300 million man army. So I've never understood, you know, all these numbers. They're all based on some things that nobody's talking about. You know, why aren't you've got 25 million Sunnis in Syria, but they can't beat Bashar al-Assad, which is only a couple million people. Sure they could. You take 25 million people, you give them all guns and anti-aircraft missiles and stuff, and an air force, and you send them after a Bashar, right? Who's only got, what, about a 20 or 50, 100,000 man army, something like that. It'd be over in 10 seconds, right? Same thing with the economy. All this stuff I've been talking about, you don't understand it because you don't understand what's really going on. With Bashar al-Assad, what you find out is really that out of those 25 or 22 million Sunnis, I think it is, in Syria, that 90% of them just don't want to fight. You know, I mean, they don't want to fight for. They'd rather suffer Bashar. I call him the beast Bashar. You know, they'd rather suffer that than get up off their asses and fight for their freedom. And you know, in the end, they're not even really so sure they could do any better job than their cruel tyrant dictator that they have. So that's a lot of the reasons. So you have to look at all the reasons, right? And with the economy, so, you know, why are 2 out of 3 people in this country over 18 not actually working? Because nobody wants to look at that reality. Everybody likes to look at the 5%. Oh, in 2008 it was 9% of America wasn't working. Well, no, it was 66%. It's always been 66%. But 9%, 5%, ooh, it's down to 3%. We almost don't have anybody to do any more jobs. Can't hire people because there's nobody to work. Bullshit. There's 66% of the people in the country who aren't working. So come on. Let's be realistic for a second, please, just to please me. Please, just please me for 5 seconds and pretend like well, don't pretend for 5 seconds. That's what I'm saying. So, supply equals demand. Because, yeah, I mean, that's it, you know. Capitalist system doesn't work. Capitalist system maybe could work, should work if you went by Keynesian economics, you know. Yes, under Keynesian economics, everybody would compete, everybody would have access. So everybody who has a good idea, banks would throw money at them, they would become the leaders, and they would produce everything that everybody needs, and everybody would have the money they need to buy what they need, and there'd be no barriers to entry. So capitalism could work, but what capitalism actually does is capitalism takes care of the people who have the money. They've set up capitalism to protect their wealth and to keep everybody else poor, because if you let them get rich, then you won't be special anymore, right? You won't be able to run things, and therefore you won't be able to protect your wealth. So people just react, right? They buy the politicians, they set things up so that they get to keep all the money and they keep everybody else out. It's called, George Carlin called it the club. The red, white, and blue club that they beat you over the head with all day, right? Yeah, with their media. It's true. As a matter of fact, I credit him in that video with being probably the source. Because, boy, I mean, when I saw that video and I started passing it around, I helped it go viral. As a matter of fact, let's do that. Let's just go ahead and let's watch that. So, just in case it's not viral enough, right? So, God. Shut up. Okay. It's right here. It's the first one.
There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back, so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later, because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all. At all. At all. Yeah. You know? And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on, the fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue dick that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
So this?
God. And then it goes straight to some massive stupidity commercial, right? I mean, what a contrast. Commercial America, American averageness just irritates the shit out of me. You know? Commercials are such a waste of time. I mean, you should just be able to Google it, basically. And I don't mean Google, I mean a free Google run by the government that just gives you a list, you know, kind of like eBay or something, but not eBay. So anyway, and what irritated me here was them, because every time I see somebody like Elizabeth Warren get up and start flapping her lips, she talks about the middle class. Man, the middle class, that's not the problem. The shrinking middle class. So she's trying to fearmonger. She's trying to scare people who have money into supporting her, because they're the voters, right? Poor people don't have time to vote. They just don't even want to be part of the system. That's why the system sucks. That's why it doesn't represent them. Because the rich people convince the people they're paying. Because, I mean, you think the people who have jobs don't know who's paying them? You know? And I don't care how liberal your boss is or the owner of your company. They're still part of it, you know? And there's no way to get around, you know the blood that flows through your veins. Well, you know the money that's in your wallet. You know where it comes from, and it makes it very hard to go against their will, right? I mean, that's what it really comes down to. It makes it almost impossible. I mean, you've got all of these ways that they can influence you, and then on top of that, the blood in your veins is owned by them. You know, it'd be like if the blood in your veins wasn't owned by you. Can you imagine if every day you woke up, the rich people all owned the blood in your veins, and at any time they could just shut it off? You would never go against them, right? You would never dare to even think negatively about things that are negative. So you'd never be able to face reality. You would have to live in denial all your life, because you'd be afraid. You know, you'd be afraid of your own blood. And I think I'll leave it there. I just want to point out that this song is not about me. If you listen to it, which you guys can go here and the No Names, I have a couple of different playlists. If you just look it up, or go to Progressive News and find it in the list of playlists. Or I have a number of places where you can find it. You can look up any of these names, the No Names, Keep Wandering, if you want to see them. And this song, just wants you to know before I go, that when it talks about it like it's talking about me, but when I'm talking about nobody cares and I'm not talking about nobody cares about me. I'm talking about and when I say nobody's willing to lend a hand, I'm talking about willing to lend a hand in the movement, you know. So I want to help poor people. I want to help people who aren't being treated fairly, fellow citizens. And yeah, I said I would talk about this, so one more thing before I go is nationalism. I do think that we should be one world, but I don't think we're ready to yet. I mean, I'm not willing to sacrifice my lifestyle, my future, just so that, you know, yeah, I will let black people in Ethiopia starve in Darfur. Okay? I'm just being honest. You know, I'm not willing to sacrifice, and it's not me. I'm not willing to sacrifice. I just said that, but it's not really true. What I'm saying is I'm not willing to sacrifice the future of Americans for people in Ethiopia. I'm sorry. I mean, I wish I was a better person, but I'm not. I'm not. I care about my country. Now, I don't believe in taking advantage of people in those countries like we're doing all over the world with our third world dictators, you know, in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Thailand and everywhere. I don't believe in that. But if we could ever get out from under this yoke of capitalism, this evil version of capitalism that is from Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, and all spread all over the world to take over the world pretty much. Russia has their own version of it now. So there's kind of the other capitalists in the world at the moment. A little bit better than us because they used to be communists. They understood that, but not really anymore. You know, the only truly good people left are places like Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua. That's truly the last bastions anymore of good people in this world. And they're almost they're indigenous, and they're the white people who support the indigenous people. So nationalism, I just think that for now nationalism has to stay. It's a bad thing. I would rather we just did it as a whole world thing and said, we're going to try and take care of all these people, and we're going to try and figure out the population thing and the supply and demand thing for real, not the way that it's taught in my classes. But for now, I don't think we can do that. I think every country needs to take care of its own people, which nobody's doing, right? Except for Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. So every country needs to figure out how to take care of its own people within the framework of trade, so that we can try and help each other take care of each other's people. But for now, I think nationalism is a good thing. You know, it's waning. I mean, look at Europe. They're doing a European thing. I don't know how well that's working or how long it's going to last. I mean, I've been watching the European elections just like you, if you've been following the daily playlist that I produce for Progressive News. You know, these playlists that are down here, like this one. You'll see in those playlists, if you go, like if you click on this one right here and go to it, like open in a new tab.
You and your team need to get things done. With Monday...
God, the commercials are just irritating as shit, aren't they? Anyway, you'll see this is an older one. The elections are going on right now, and you'll see a lot of stuff about it, so anyway, so the nationalism is fading because these nations are finding out that the bigger they are, the better they're able to protect their people's interests. Well, their rich people's interest, and then the rich people take care of the rest of the people as however they take care of them, right? Worst case example, places like Syria, where Bashar doesn't take care of his people, and then they rise up and he has to fight a war to survive. So, still, I think that for now, I mean, we should be working towards a one world solution, a whole world solution, but for now I stay with the nationalism. And I said I'd cover that, and that's just real brief, but that's basically where I'm at on that. So, this is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. I hope, I know it can seem kind of rambling, but I am actually trying to cover all the bases and trying to make sure that all the important points are made clear. Because if we don't understand, if we're not reality based, if we don't stick to the facts and try and, because that's how you solve problems, okay? You model reality, you make mental models of reality, and the closer they are to reality, the closer your solutions will be to a real solution. So, this is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. Thanks for watching and listening.